Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. There is a crisis in Syria. President Bashar al-Assad may lose control over his territory. What is happening in Syria? What are the origins of this conflict? What is the role of the regional players such as Iran, Turkey? What is the role of Russia and the United States of America in this conflict? Is the US getting involved in this conflict now? Which means, is the President Biden making it difficult for his successor Donald Trump in this region? What are the implications of this conflict, not just on the Middle East, but also on India? To discuss this and much more, we have our international relations expert, Chethan sir, joining us today. Chethan sir, tell us about this conflict. What is the origin of this conflict? We understand that there was something called Arab Spring, series of protests which started in Tunisia against corruption, against economic stagnation, which later on led to pro-democracy movement in the Middle East. Tunisia, then in Lebanon, in Bahrain, to an extent in Saudi Arabia, Iran as well, and Syria. What is this conflict in Syria?
What you're seeing right now, this goes all the way back to 2010. As you correctly pointed out, the Arab Spring, the pro-democracy revolutionary movement that went viral across Middle East, North Africa region, is the source of all these conflicts, be it in Libya or as we saw in Egypt, and of course in Syria as well. So it did start out in Tunisia as an organic pro-democracy movement, where people across the MENA region, the Middle East, North Africa region, they were frustrated with these autocratic dictatorial regimes. And that is when social media had become big. And by leveraging the power of social media, protesters, organizers, they could evade government surveillance.
The famous Tahrir
Square protests. Yeah. And Tunisia saw this massive uprising, and it was a successful revolt where they toppled the dictator. And this idea that people could organize themselves, use social media and come together and throw out dictators was a novel idea in the region. So it immediately went viral. We saw the same happen in Egypt, where Hosni Mubarak was kicked out. And initially, though it was organic, later what we saw by 2011 was that regional and extra-regional powers, they realized what they could do with this idea. They started meddling, they started interfering, essentially pushing for regime change.
On the 10th of December, 7 p.m. onwards, on Unacademy UPSC Unstoppable's YouTube channel, we are going live to celebrate the 9 years of the success of the Unacademy group. Lots of influencers, your top educators, and lots of surprises in store for you. Do not forget to join us live on the 10th of December, 7 p.m. onwards. Let's crack it. So what they could not do previously, now they want to do it now.
Now, it was much easier for them to do that. The momentum was there. People were, they were expressing their angst by using social media platforms. And Western countries especially realized they could push for regime change in countries like Libya, throw Gaddafi out. And that's exactly what they did. US, UK and France, they carried out a military intervention as well. And Syria was always a prime target for them. In fact, prior to 2011, Syria was a very stable country. Though it was ruled by Assad, who's an authoritarian dictator, country was very stable. Economy was doing very well. And though it's a Sunni majority country and the Alawite sect, which is a part of Shia Islam, Assad comes from the Alawite sect. So though Assad comes from the minority and he still did have a good hold on the country, but there were pockets, certain pockets where Assad had a stronger influence, particularly coastal part of Syria, Damascus. This is where the Alawites are stronger. But in other parts, the Sunnis are stronger. And despite that, Assad had a good degree of control, his father as well. The whole Assad family had a decent control on the country. There was stability. So this is something that was never liked by the Sunni powers, which are rivals of the Shia powers. And of course, by extension, Israel and United States. So as Assad and Syria were allies of Iran in the Shia-Sunni conflict, Saudi Arabia, Israel, US saw this as a great opportunity, and they ganged up together
to overthrow the Assad regime,
to back the dissidents, the rebels, and that's how the Free Syrian Army was born. And that is the beginning of the Syrian conflict in 2000.
But what is happening currently? There was a relative peace for 4 years from 2020. This is when Turkey also got involved to mediate in this conflict. Russia has had an important role in exercising control over the territory in Syria, because without Russian support, Bashar al-Assad may not have been able to survive
Absolutely.
So if the pro-democracy movement became successful in Egypt, in Libya, in Tunisia, but it failed in Syria because of the Russian involvement, because of the Iranian involvement. Now, do you think that because Russia is busy with Ukraine and Iran is also busy because Hezbollah, which was providing much needed support to Bashar al-Assad, it has been weakened because of the attacks by Israel? And that is what has precipitated this crisis now. Maybe there are world powers who are trying to see an opening here and they want to quickly go for a regime change in Syria.
Yeah, absolutely. In international relations, there's no coincidence. Behind everything, there is a motive, there is an intent. So there would be these vested interests who would try to capitalize on the opportunities which get created. And I think that is what we are seeing right now. Because for the last 4 years, as you pointed out, Syria was largely stable. There was a relative peace of sorts between the regime and the rebel groups and the various militant factions. So now why is this happening all of a sudden? To examine this, I would like to take you back. If you can give me a few minutes, let's go through the events post 2011. So after the civil war broke out, the Free Syrian Army and the rebels, they made very quick advances. They captured some territory in southern parts of Syria near Damascus, the capital itself. And this is where few extremist forces also started getting a fertile ground in the region. Because if you look at the region, neighboring country Iraq had already been destabilized by the controversial invasion of US and UK. And this is where few radical groups were thriving already. And that immediately saw an extension across the border into Syria, where in eastern parts, the branches of Al-Qaeda started extending their influence. And we saw this extend towards northwestern part of Syria as well. So basically, Assad was cornered from the south, east, and west, leaving only Damascus and the Alawite dominated areas in his
in the coastal areas.
So this is where Russian intervention was absolutely critical. The otherwise stable country had been destroyed, devastated by this conflict in 3-4 years. There was a massive refugee crisis, and Turkey took the burden of that as a neighboring country. So in 2015, that's when Putin stepped in, because Putin had seen how other powers had exploited this conflict, how, for example, regime change was pushed in Libya. And he would never allow this to happen in Syria, because Syria is critical for Russian influence in the region.
Why?
And don't forget, Russia has a military base and a naval base in Syria, which is key for Russian Navy to access the Mediterranean. And this is something of strategic concern for Russia as well. Plus, Russia has been an ally of Iran. And given that Syria is a close ally of Iran, there is an access between them. There is an alliance of sorts between them. So Russia would never allow Assad to be toppled. Iran would never allow Assad to be toppled. So without Iranian support, the IRGC played a covert role in backing these rebels and militants, including Hezbollah from neighboring Lebanon. And in Iraq also there's a faction of Hezbollah, the Kataib Hezbollah.
Rebels in the sense those who favored Bashar al-Assad.
Favor Bashar al-Assad, exactly. So Iran captured this momentum which was there in favor of the regime, in favor of Assad as well, and mobilized all these extremist militant outfits and backed them from Iraq and Lebanon to support the Assad regime. And later Russia stepped in, a direct military intervention, something which we had never seen in a long time. And Russia carried out airstrikes. It brought in military troops, and even the private military contractors, the Wagner group, was deployed. So very quickly, Russia managed to protect Assad's regime. That added the muscle that was needed to push back the rebels who were against Assad's regime. And by 2016, Russia successfully cleared out most of these territories. So it took a lot of effort from Russia and Iran to save Assad's regime and regain some territory which was lost. And this is where things get even more interesting. Parallelly, there was a branch of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was headed by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi at that point. And Baghdadi, who would later go on to found Islamic State, ISIS, would send one of his close associates, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, who later founded al-Nusra Front, which is the branch of Al-Qaeda in Syria. So the al-Nusra Front, which came up in Syria, particularly around Idlib, Aleppo, in the northwestern parts, it was essentially backed by United States. There are strong allegations that the CIA was involved in backing a faction of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Why?
So basically a repeat of what United States did in Afghanistan. Backing Taliban and the rebels against the Soviet Union.
Creating the Mujahideen against the Soviet troops, something similar to that. And look at the hypocrisy of this. Parallelly, US was fighting Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, in Yemen and other parts of the world. But they are backing a faction of Al-Qaeda in Syria. So Al-Nusra Front is today's HTS, the group which has made global headlines in the last week, which has captured significant territory and posed a threat again to Assad. So the previous version of HTS was al-Nusra Front, headed
So
by
all the
al-Jawlani.
territorial gains of 4 years were lost by Bashar al-Assad in 4
In
days.
4 days. This is something unprecedented.
So without global backing, this may not have happened.
This may not have happened. For one extremist group to carry out such a major assault, capture key cities. Don't forget, Aleppo is the commercial hub, the equivalent of India's Mumbai. And they have taken Hama, Homs. Almost entire northwest, western part of Syria is gone. It's come under the control of HTS.
So it looks very difficult for Bashar al-Assad to replicate what he did in the past. Now he may not have the backing of Russia and Iran.
Yeah.
So do you think it is the involvement of President Biden here? He wants to make things difficult for his successor, Donald Trump?
Maybe. Things look like that because if you look at Biden's decision to allow Ukraine to use ATACMS, the long-range missiles, that was a deliberate provocation to provoke Putin and make things difficult before Trump takes over. And we have seen signs of that. So is this an extension of that? You never know. Could be. Is US involved in backing HTS? Because it is undeniable that CIA had links with al-Nusra Front. And now HTS is the new variant of al-Nusra Front. So is there American involvement? Because again, don't forget, these elements realize that Russia is distracted in Ukraine. Russia may not be able to give the same kind of support to Assad as it did before. And Iran, as you correctly pointed out, has been weakened by Israel. Iran has been taking multiple hits. Hezbollah has been almost decimated. Leadership has been wiped out by Israel. So this was an opportune time for HTS to make these moves. And the question is there foreign involvement? Is there American involvement? Again, reports say there could be Turkish involvement. Turkey is known to back the Free Syrian Army because the problem for Turkey is it has received all the refugees, which has become a burden. And second, Turkey wants to emerge as a regional power as well, create a space between the Sunni and Shia powers for itself, and also the Kurdish issue, where Turkey faces the separatist movement from the Kurds.
Now, pro-Kurdish groups in Syria, they seem to be in agreement with Turkey.
Yeah, this is only with regard to the Kurd groups in Syria, where they have struck a detente with Assad's regime and they've been given some sort of autonomy. And this could mostly be because of US involvement, because when ISIS was decimated in Iraq and Syria, US relied on Kurd support. It was the Kurd militias which was sponsored by the US along with American special forces, which took out ISIS. ISIS has been pushed into a corner in eastern Syria today. So maybe US-Turkey alliance could be playing a role.
But US, even if it gets involved in this conflict, but sometimes the outcome is not in its favor. For example, when US tried to hijack the Arab Spring, the pro-democracy movements, it basically backfired on United States when it comes to Egypt, because Hosni Mubarak was a trusted ally, if I can use that term, for United States. So the fall of Hosni Mubarak, it was as if it was the beginning of the end of American monopoly in the Middle East. So America may not always come out unscathed from this conflict. But what are your learnings from this conflict, and how it is going to be important for the security of the Middle East? Because Middle East is an important strategic area. What will be the implication if these jihadist groups overthrow Assad, capture political power in Syria? What are going to be the ripple effects of this takeover?
The biggest,
because it may not end with Syria. It may
expand as well. Because until now, the only jihadist outfit which had managed to capture large territory was Islamic State from eastern Syria to Iraq, which was later wiped out. So after ISIS, it is HTS which has captured significant territory in the region. So this territorial control being gained by the extremists could further spread extremism beyond the borders of Syria. Into the neighboring countries, maybe Jordan, maybe Iraq, and could have an impact on the Israel-Gaza conflict as well. And it would be interesting to see how Iran would play a role going forward, given the fact that Iran would try to regroup Hezbollah and bring back support in favor of Assad. So Iran might increase its commitment in the region to play this covert game. So that could again increase hostilities between Iran and Israel as well.
So if you look at the global media, which is now very quick in writing obituary of Bashar al-Assad, but maybe this may be part of his strategy, what he did previously, which is withdraw from the areas, then regroup, and then launch an attack. Is that going to be the strategy of Bashar al-Assad now as well?
But I don't think Assad can rely on that same strategy again, because as I said, Russia may not be in the same mood to support Assad as it did before.
But Russia has made significant gains on the Ukraine front as well.
Yeah.
So
But
maybe
don't forget, Russian resources have been drained as well. It's relying on North Korea for troops.
Yeah.
It's relying on Iran for weapons and China as well. So Russia may not have the same kind of bandwidth to come to Assad's rescue.
do you anticipate Chinese involvement then?
Highly doubt it.
They don't do
Chinese usually they're very smart, very shrewd. They focus more on their economic gains and influence. They don't directly get involved in conflicts generally.
What is the implication on India?
For India, the implication would be the larger destabilization of West Asia. Syria at one point was an important trading partner. There were key raw materials that we procured from Syria, which took a hit since the civil war started. But now the main impact would be the wider destabilization of West Asia. If these regional powers, the Shia Sunni powers, Turkey, Israel, if they escalate this conflict with involvement of Russia and US, this could lead to a bigger conflict in the region that could compromise our energy security. The shipping lanes could be disrupted with a wider conflict. Plus, don't forget the Indian community in West Asia. We have one of the strongest diasporas in the region.
So something similar what Houthis did with blocking the Red Sea.
With yeah, exactly. Or how Indians they fell into a conflict zone in Yemen,
left stranded, and had to be evacuated.
Yeah, so that could be a big challenge for India, taking care of the safety and well-being of the Indian community, securing our energy interests, and also we have very close ties with all these powers, be it the Shia powers, the Sunni powers, or Israel. We have very good relations with all of them, but Turkey being an exception. Turkey of late has been a little hostile to India. But it would be interesting to see how India would try to balance this out.
Why do you think there was a change in the approach of Turkey towards India?
Turkey started showing this pro-Pakistan inclination. And I think this has more to do with Turkey's own domestic politics and as well as its external image it's trying to project. Under Recep Erdogan, Turkey has shed away its secular credentials. It has pushed itself as a protector of the entire Muslim world. And it wants to create a space, as I said, for itself. Between the Sunni power led by Saudi bloc and the Shia bloc led by Iran. And this maybe pushes Turkey to take a stand.
So basically, Erdogan wants to take up the role of the leadership of the Muslim world, particularly the Sunnis, and displace Saudi Arabia from that position.
It appears like that.
This was also seen when the way he welcomed then Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan to Turkey.
Right.
And because of his utterances against the Citizenship Amendment Act, and also when
on issues of Kashmir,
on Article 370 revocation.
And if you look at OIC, the grouping where India was targeted by Pakistan repeatedly for Kashmir or CAA protests, Turkey came in support for Pakistan along with Azerbaijan. And this created a new complication. Malaysia as well.
Right.
So that has created new complications for India.
So interesting stuff happening in Syria, although it is also a big humanitarian crisis. Millions of refugees, millions of displaced people. But thank you so much, Chethan sir, for joining us today and giving us your insights on what is happening in Syria and why this region is significant for India. To those who have watched us today, thank you so much. If you have further questions on this topic, do let us know in the comment section and I will request Chethan sir to personally respond to your queries. Thank you for watching. All the best. Stay safe.